Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Hello.
Ruben Bressler.
Hey, I'm ready to rock.
Oh, we're ready to do this. We're ready to mana rock.
I learned so much. Did you know that there are eggs? And I don't mean like the deck eggs, and I don't mean baby trans eggs. Did you know there are mana eggs and cameos? I didn't know about cameos. Like there was, I learned so much going into this.
There are so many random artifacts
Border
that make
posts?
mana.
Diamonds. Diamonds are sweet. I always like diamonds. So we'll see how many we get to in terms of cycles. But that said, we'll get to that in just a moment. We begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most elegant, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 counterspells. Ruben?
This week's winner is Pocket Healer, who writes, "My honorable mention would have to go to Render Silent from Dragon's Maze. A counterspell with silence stapled onto it is one heck of a way to deny and shut down someone and watch their smile quickly morph into a frown, provided it resolves. Nothing screams more Azorius than the flavor text as well, and I love that."
Thank you so much, Pocket Healer, for being a part of the show. Please contact Erin. She is now not protected.
She can still block you.
She will still block you, but you can go follow her on Twitter. Original Ostrich.
Yeah.
Screw that up every time. Stop it.
Ostrich oatmeal, it's fine.
Yep, ostrich oatmeal. Got it.
Original uterus.
There we go. Original Elkstress. There we go.
Elkstress. There we go.
Elkstress is nice. That said, thanks also to Cool Stuff Inc. for sponsoring this $50 gift certificate giveaway. And hope you also interact with this show as well as we move on here to our top 10 mana rocks. I had a little bit of criteria myself for this one. My criteria was that I wanted to make sure that the card made mana by itself without having to sacrifice itself. It could make it over and over. That was my criteria. But
Okay.
I didn't really have too many. I mean, for me, I think my top 5 are more competitive mana rocks, and my bottom 5 are more cards that I've gotten a lot of use out of in Commander, because Commander lives and dies by its mana rocks, and so you'll find my bottom 5 are a lot more fun and lulzy, and my top 5 are more serious business.
I wanted to make sure that all of mine are non-creature artifacts. I felt like that was a definition of the word rock. Pet rocks are nice, but they are not animate. They don't attack and block. And so I avoided my creatures with power and toughness that make mana. I also wanted to make sure that we touched on competitive constructed mana rocks, because mana rocks in Commander are a huge deal, but I also wanted to make sure that we had some Pro Tour champions, not just cue ball stars, going into the lists.
Well, Ruben, why don't you kick us off with your number 10?
My number 10 is one of those artifacts that I was referencing. It was part of a cycle that came out in the Mercadian Masks expansion. The entire cycle, I think, qualify as mana rocks, but this particular one I wanted to focus on was Eye of Ramos. Part of an entire cycle of Ramos artifacts that cost 3 mana, and they were rares. Eye of Ramos taps for 1 blue mana, and you can sacrifice it for 1 blue mana. So it could jump you from 3 to 6 on turn 4, for example. And in the hands of Sigurd Eskeland, took down Pro Tour New York in the year 2000. That was one of the couple of Rebels Pro Tours where 6 Rebels decks made the top 8, but it was a mono blue fish deck with Rising Waters that took down the event. And I wanted to focus on that one as well. This was one of the early 3 mana rocks that was able to jump you even further into the lead. 6 mana spells at the time were a big deal. Things like Wildfire, 5/5 dragons for 6. 6 mana was a really clutch point in the game, and being able to get there on turn 4 was a big deal. And also these are, all 5 of these, I believe, are, obviously they were all part of Ramos, the Dragon Engine. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think all 5, the eye, the heart, the horn, the skull, and the tooth, were part of the legacy weapon.
I believe so, yes.
So yeah, a full 5/17 of the legacy weapon in these mana rocks.
I love these cards. I remember I started playing around Ice Age, and so I was around when these cards came out, and I remember being a kid and looking at them, and then looking at the flavor text of, on the Eye of Ramos, Ramos wept and there were seas. Heart of Ramos, Ramos bled and there was fire. The flavor text made Ramos sound like this incredible being, but we never got to meet Ramos until one of the recent Commander sets. They made Ramos Dragon Engine, and that was sort of a dog whistle where, a lot of the newer fans were like, oh, there's this cute little dragon. I wonder what this guy does. And the old veterans were like, it's Ramos! Yep. And we were just we knew who he was. We couldn't wait. We've been waiting a lifetime to meet Ramos. And it's fair to say that he lived up to his name because the card is incredible.
It's kind of odd to see a whole series of sort of mana rocks that they haven't really come close to making as efficient since. Now,
these were rare.
And this is also Mercadian Mask, which is this is the reaction to Urza's block. This is the pulling back of the power level. And the pulling back is, we'll give you 2 mana of any color you want in these mana rocks however you want. All right, well, that's fine. Yeah. That seems cool. Also, because they are very, very specific, that also makes them very difficult to reprint, even if they're not on the reserve list. So foils, and particularly foil rares, are like $22. So that's cool. And like Mercadian Mask rares look awesome anyway.
Yeah.
But that card is sweet. Aaron, what's your number 10?
I like to describe my Zhanchi EDH deck as a safe space deck. Like, I want you to feel safe, and I want you to feel like you have the freedom to activate Zhanchi and draw cards. I want to help you with that. And so one of the ways that I can help you with that is with my number 10, which is Victory Chimes. So Victory Chimes is from Battle Bond. It's 3 colorless. It's an artifact. Untap Victory Chimes during each other player's untap step. And you can tap it. A player of your choice adds 1 wingding. So you can give it to yourself. Or if you see somebody struggling, you're like, hey girl, you need a little colorless for something? You got a board wipe? You're going to help us out here? Or do you just want to draw some cards? Like, I got you. And so there's a couple artifacts that are sort of like this that allow you to give mana to people, but this untaps at every untap step. So, you can really play this sort of altruistic game of like, you need some help? I got you. Wow. And, but you really want to give people the freedom to activate Zhanchi and just watch them kill each other.
I've legitimately never seen that magic.
Yeah, it's great. It's like 50 cents, and I love it. I think it's for exactly that deck. It's perfect because you want people to just drain the person with Zhanchi.
Battle Bond was such a really cool and unique.
I love Battle Bond. It's so good.
It's so sweet. Like, at the time, I felt almost too weird to love, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But as time gone on, people were like, wow, that set was great. That set was fun. The cards in that set were really cool.
I feel like Wizards is at its best when it just lets its hair down. When you get the battle bonds and the conspiracies and the unstables, that is, I love, those are some of my favorite sets right there.
Right, and even the playtest cards that just came out. Like, just a ton of fun.
Throat Wolf and Lose with Nothing, or whatever the new one is.
Like One with Death, I think it was.
One with Death.
One with Death and 5 kids in a trench coat.
Please tell me someone's giving you that.
I've been looking. They're like $20 on eBay. So
wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
I know what I'm getting Evan for Christmas.
There you go.
There you go.
Somehow maybe find an art print. That'd be also very funny. I don't know who did the art for that. So for my number 10, this is an old school Magic card. This is a card that I got to play with way back in the day, because it is a card from one of the first Magic sets ever, which is fun in and of itself. But for me, this card was reprinted specifically in 5th edition. And because it was in 5th edition, it essentially saw play in that standard environment. So I was able to get to play with this card, and later I got to put it in my cube, and I got to see how this card essentially changed over time. And there was always this weird feeling, and it was always a really good feeling, when you would play your Fellor Stone, and they're playing the same type of lands as you are, and you're like, oh no, you give me this, you give me that mana, because Fellor Stone is my number 10. I absolutely love it. It's a 2 generic mana artifact that says tap, add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce.
Yeah, Fellor Stone's great.
Yep, it's just good, efficient. Came all the way back from the dark, and it's still being printed to this day. I mean, it last saw print in Commander Anthology Volume 2 as well as Commander 2017. So,
yeah,
Fellor's great.
They turned it into a land, I believe, which was Exotic Orchard, maybe 15 years, 20 years after its original printing. Fellor Stone is, anything that taps for mana can be useful. And particularly in decks that can use all types of mana, or 3 different colors of mana, or what have you, it can be extremely useful as well. So, definitely a great one.
Exotic Orchard's been reprinted all the way to Commander 2019, which is pretty incredible in and of itself. But yeah, Fellor Stone, again, this to me was like, this was my first mana rock. This was baby's first mana rock of like, oh my god. Because when I first saw this card back in the day, I was like, it's got to be terrible, right? They're like, no, it takes you from 2 to 4. And if they're playing your colors, great. If they're not, it doesn't matter. It's still making you mana. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. Sort of a very teaching, learning moment for me in Magic. All right, let's move on here to number 9. Aaron, what's number 9?
My number 9 is a key piece of my Rakdos Lord of Riots EDH deck. Rakdos is an amazing beater and allows you to do some really dumb things, but he does have a catch. He does have a condition, and that condition is that somebody has to take damage or lose life in order for you to even cast Rakdos. But if you can get around that, you can have a really good time. And so if you need a mana dork and you need a way to deal damage to your opponent, I can't think of a better option than my number 9, which is Cryptolith Fragment. So Cryptolith Fragment is 3 colorless. It's from Eldritch Moon. It's an artifact. Cryptolith Fragment enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Each player loses 1 life. Sweet. At the beginning of your upkeep, if each player has 10 or less life, transform Cryptolith Fragment, and then it becomes Aurora of Emrakul. Try saying that 3 times fast. Where it becomes an Eldrazi Reflection with 1 power and 4 toughness, with flying and death touch, and whenever it attacks, each opponent loses 3 life. When we went back to Innistrad, we got to see the Eldrazi's effect on the werewolves and the humans and the vampires, and also just on artifacts, on just mana dorks. And so I really, really love the way that this works. It gives you mana, and if it sticks around for long enough, you might just be able to win a game with it. And I've had a lot of fun with this card.
This one also told a story that was a central part of the Eldritch Moon storyline, which was the clues. They didn't really know why these random stork-looking outcroppings were happening, and then they began to turn into these fragments. These were part of the big mystery of the set. And while this card did not see a ton of competitive play, it told that story and has now started seeing a bunch of play in Commander. Because everybody losing life is a big deal, and everybody losing 3 life is a very big deal. And yeah, it's just a really fun card.
Right, and turn into a pseudo 4/4 flyer, which makes them lose life. Even if they block, you're still losing 3 no matter what. It's flying and death touch. No one's going to want to block this thing anyway. And it's really cool to kind of turn into a mana rock into a threat, essentially, out of nowhere.
Yeah, it goes with your play pattern. It ramps you early, and then once you're done needing to ramp, it becomes a threat.
Nice. Ruben, what's number 9?
My number 9 is just an all-star in multiple decks that have one of which won a Pro Tour and one of which won Worlds. And so to get both of those on your checklist, you got to make an appearance. Yeah. There's been a number of decks in the history of Magic that have wanted to go from 2 to 4 to 6. It's a common play pattern, particularly in ramp decks, where you want to play your Rampant Growth on 2, you want to play your Explosive Vegetation on 4, and then you want to play a 6-drop on the next turn. And nowhere was that more true than the Kessig ramp strategies. The Titans on 6, Inferno and Primeval Titans in particular, sometimes Frost Titan as well. Your 4-drops typically being Solemn Simulacrum, sometimes extraneous Rampant Growths. But the 2-drop of all 2-drops that you wanted was Sphere of the Suns. Sphere of the Suns is a 2-colorless mana artifact. It was an uncommon originally in Mirrored and Besieged that enters the battlefield tapped with 3 charge counters on it. You could tap and remove a charge counter from it to add 1 mana of any color. Very similar to Gemstone Mine. This is essentially Gemstone Mine, the mana rock. It was able to fix your mana. It let you play things like a blue splashed Kessig deck or a black splash Kessig deck. It was just a very popular piece of all of those Kessig Titan decks from the 2012, 2011 era. And even to this day, it is a solid option in any of your Commander decks as a 2-mana mana fixer, because it can add mana of any color.
Yeah, great budget option. I've spoken before about my love for Commander's Quarters, one of my favorite channels on YouTube. If you're looking for Commander, and specifically cheap Commander, definitely go follow them. And this is one of the artifacts that you can find in a lot of their decks, along with like Wayfarer's Bauble and things like that. I'd never really heard of the card until recently, and now I have I order them in bulk. Just because I'm going to need them. They just do what they do very well, and yeah, good card.
Yeah, Sphere of the Suns is one of those sort of classic, at least sort of at the time. I mean, this is also very much an artifact of its time where they were not really pushing cards that hard, but just enough to where you still have a 2-mana mana rock and you get 3 uses out of it, but you still have to wait a turn. I feel like in today's sensibilities, you wouldn't have it come into play tapped, that we're kind of used to kind of getting our goodies immediately and not having to wait for them. Either way, Gemstone Mine on a mana rock is awesome, and this card was absolutely terrific in its day.
Yeah.
All right. My number 9 was one of my favorite Magic cards at the time it was printed. It's been reprinted a bunch, and it don't matter. It's still worth almost $3 because even as an uncommon, everybody loves this card. This card was totally sweet. It was in a set that had a fantastic mechanic that is literally just perfect for a mana rock. It's so cool. And at the time, I got to hang out with R&D and talk to them about it and tell them how much I loved and was able to put it on my cubes and draft early in my cubes, put every single Everflowing Chalice I could into my decks. Everflowing Chalice is amazing. It is a 0-cost artifact, but it has multi-kicker of 2 generic mana, which means you may pay an additional 2 generic mana any number of times as you cast a spell. Everflowing Chalice enters the battlefield with a charge counter on it for each time it was kicked, and you tap and you add a colorless mana for each charge counter on Everflowing Chalice.
Good in the early game, good in the late game. I was actually seeing competitive play in Modern right now in the Paradoxical Urza decks, because in Modern, you can't play Moxen, you can't play any of the other cheap artifacts, you can't play a Mana Crypt or a Mana Vault, but you can play an Everflowing Chalice for 0, and it's still something that you can bounce with Paradoxical Outcome. It's still something you can use with Urza. Like, I mean, and they're running like 4-ofs.
Yeah, I believe
What a world.
Yeah, this thing came out in World Wake, and it was absolutely terrific from the moment it saw print.
It's slightly worse as a 2-mana artifact than many of the options on our list. It's slightly worse than a 4-mana artifact like a Hedron Archive. It's certainly slightly worse than a Dreamstone Hedron at 6. But the fact that you can play it for 0 and tap it for blue mana with Urza, or you can play it for 10 and have a million charge counters on it, or do charge counter shenanigans with it, makes it well worth it. Most of the time, it is just going to tap for a colorless. But you know what? It's mostly good enough when it just taps for a colorless. Everflowing Chalice is really excellently designed, and it stands the test of time. It's a really good one, and it will be for the foreseeable future.
Very nice. Let's move on here to number 8. Mine is higher on someone else's list. It's a great mana rock, so I'm excited to talk about it later. Ruben, what's your number 8?
My number 8, when you talk about the controlliest control mages in the history of Magic, you can't talk about it without talking about Guillaume Waffle Tapa. Guillaume Waffle Tapa won Pro Tour Yokohama in 2007 with a blue-black control deck. And it mostly had control cards in it. It had your Teferis, it had 4 copies of Cancel, which I love. It had Mystical Teachings, but it also had 4 copies of only one type of mana rock, and that mana rock was Prismatic Lens.
Nice.
Prismatic Lens is a common, originally from Time Spiral. Most recently, it was an uncommon in Ultimate Masters. When you tap it, you add a colorless, and when you pay any generic mana and tap it, you add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So it both ramps you and fixes you. It is able to do a bit of a prism effect, but it can also take you from 2 to 4, which was a big deal, and it's just a really good card. It comes into play untapped. It was originally a common, so it's just spectacular for those draft decks as well. Just an amazing card.
Yeah, Prismatic Lens was an all-star in that weird as a block format, right? This was...
Yes, this was Time Spiral block.
Yeah, it was Time Spiral block. Prismatic Lens was obviously the best thing you'd be doing at level at 2 because there was no more rampant growth in any format. So it ramped you. It fixed all your mana. There was lots of different mana costs you had in that deck. That deck in particular was just so mana hungry. It just needed infinite mana to run. And Prismatic Lens and multiple Prismatic Lenses were A-okay because you just needed all the mana all the time.
Yep.
And of course,
another budget option that I have in a lot of my decks that I'd never really heard of, and now depending on the deck, my Marchesa deck has it, my Muldrotha deck has it. If you're running more than 2 colors, you can do a lot worse than this card.
Yeah, I mean they're a quarter or less, and rock on.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron.
Rock on.
Yeah. Aaron, what's number 8?
So I'm going to pull a Ruben. My 8 and my 7 are both hires. I will see you guys.
Wow.
A couple,
The only number 8. Look at you, Bruce.
fine. I'll just vamp for the next deal. Just be like, yeah.
Very nice. All right, we're going to move on here.
Find my light, you know.
Right, number 7. My number 7 is this is a personal choice. I didn't dig too deep into its tournament pedigree. Lord Almighty.
Tournament pedigree.
All I know is this was one of my first mana rocks beyond Fellor Stone. Now, when Fellor Stone was the hot stuff, and this is what we're doing, what we're playing, it's how mana rocks work. Oh my gosh! But when they give us one, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, and you're like, wait a minute, that mana rock does what? You can tap a thing and do the what to draw the what? Because Mind Stone showed up in Weatherlight, and it was like, oh, dag, Mind Stone is dope. Mind Stone is way better than Fellor Stone. Mind Stone is 2 generic mana for an artifact that says tap to add a colorless mana, or 1 generic mana, tap, sacrifice it to draw a card. 3 magical words stuck on a mana rock.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fine card. I mean, a lot of the mana rocks that are out there are just mana rocks, and sometimes the time has come where you don't need the mana anymore, and you don't need it. You don't need the artifact as a permanent for Sun's Blessing or whatever it might be. You need action. You need gas, and so being able to turn this card into gas is really, really great. I have this on my Locust God EDH deck because it gets me a Locust. So not only does it help me with trying to move into the late game, transition in the late game, it also gives me the ability to draw a card and get a bug at instant speed. Exactly. That's really cool.
A lot of the best mana rocks are able to ramp you early and then still be useful later.
Yeah.
And Mind Stone is useful later in one of the best ways. It's able to draw a card. 3 magical words that, boy, I love them. And everybody else does too. This has also inspired Hedron Archive and Dreamstone Hedron. Being essentially 2 Mind Stones and 3 Mind Stones stapled together. And yeah, Mind Stone is always good whenever it's printed. And I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Sees competitive play sometimes, too. I seem to recall Mono Red Prison and Legacy occasionally trotting one of these out, where it's like, you always got to read it. You're like, you're playing Legacy, right?
I mean, first, like
the
Gateway 2007 version is so incredibly awesome.
Where it looks like a brain.
Yes. It looks like a brain. It's absolutely amazing. That's less than $10. It's like $9.50.
But I do love the old one where it's like they're holding it and they're like controlling. That's cool too.
That one's super cool.
Yeah.
They gave it back to us in 10th edition to bring it back into standard, and like it was played everywhere. This is back when Wildfire came back into standard as well.
Wildfire.
They put Wildfire and Mind Stone and what was the Vor Magnivore?
Magnivore.
It was so stupid.
They let us go nuts. That format also I think just had regular Stone Rain
and Annex. Remember Annex?
And Annex, yeah, brutal.
4 mana enchant land to gain control of their land.
Yeah, if you think that 2/4/6 is bad now, just wait until it's Mind Stone into Annex into 6-drop.
Whoa.
Yeah,
it's
brutal.
Pass.
Oh my god! All right, so Ruben, what is your number 7?
Speaking of Wildfire, one of the myriad times that actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. My number 7 is actually higher on somebody else's list.
Well, you got to carry number 8. I got to carry number 7.
There you go. I was talking about my number 6. So
well, you know what?
You can skip that.
Why don't you just go ahead, buddy, and tell us about your number 6?
Hey. Speaking of Wildfire, flawless segue. One of the many times that Kai Bude won a major tournament was Worlds 1999 in Yokohama, when he won with a Wildfire deck. Earlier that same year, Casey McCarroll won Pro Tour New York 1999, and in both decks were copies of Worn Power Stone. Worn Power Stone, 3 colorless mana, originally from Urza's Saga, enters the battlefield tapped and has tap, add 2 colorless to your mana pool. Extremely powerful card. This card was able to power out Wildfires. It was able to power out Colossuses, Phyrexian Processors, whatever you wanted to be doing. It even powered up your Strokes of Genius, your Temporal Apertures, lots of those old school style mana-hungry artifacts, and by the way, also Wildfires that were able to completely demolish boards on your opponent's sides of things.
Yeah, this would take you from like 3 to 6, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's a leap. That's a serious... They didn't put this back in standard, ever.
Comes into play tap for a reason.
Oh, yeah,
That's
it
right.
does, which is kind of bananas. So this card is still worth $1.50 or so, regardless of the fact that they printed it over and over and over again. Dual decks, commander decks, Eternal Masters. It's just can be played in everything. This can be played in any deck you want, any commander deck you want. And like I said, they don't make them like this anymore. They just... They're not okay with this jump that you get with this card. But in Commander, who cares? Have fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Aaron, what's number 6?
My number 6 actually came out earlier this year and immediately made an impact on 4 formats, just like you do, you know? And was so powerful, it got itself banned in Pauper. Hashtag Pauper. My number 6 is Comes Astrolabe. So Comes Astrolabe is from Modern Horizons. It costs 1 snow mana. Look that one up, kids. It's a snow artifact. Snow can be paid with 1 mana from a snow permanent. When Comes Astrolabe enters the battlefield, draw a card, and then you can use a colorless and tap to add 1 mana of any color. Looks harmless enough, but this card on its own made snow-covered lands just better than any other land out there. Pauper, Modern, Legacy, Vintage. The deck that won the Vintage Challenge this past weekend was Sultai Urza with Oko, and they were running this card. Like, this card is amazing. After Deathrite Shaman got banned in Legacy, we started to not see as many of the check pile decks, kind of the random 4-color nonsense decks. Well, baby, they're back between this and Ren and 6. I mean, colors just don't matter anymore. Obviously, this sees play in the Modern Urza decks in terms of all of the artifact nonsense that's going out there. I mean, the fixing was just so perfect. It was detrimental to Pauper. Like, if you looked at the metagame after this, the Pauper players were just begging, like, this card is warping our format beyond repair, in terms of just colors not mattering anymore. I had a friend that was playing Black-White Pestilence prior to this card coming out in Pauper, and then when I looked at the Pestilence decks after, I was like, what is going on here? Astrolabe makes everything better, and like it looks so innocent, and yet it had such a damning effect on the game, and still does.
Yeah.
One of the things that Wizards always told me, and that Wizards R&D always kind of promised, they said, look, power creep is always relative, We're not making anything better than Moxen. He said, but we have another rule, and the rule is you can't ever make a land that's better than a basic land. Well, guess what? They put the word snow on it, and it's better than a basic whatever type of land it is, because now it's a snow thing, and now you can play this thing, and it draws a card and makes mana colors not matter. So between replacing itself / card advantage / if they destroy it, they look like idiots because now they're down a card. Anything in your deck that has mana, like actual mana requirements, doesn't really matter anymore, because even if you get multiples of these, that's great. Play more of them. Draw more cards. Who cares?
Right. This plus Ephemerate also completely demolished the Pauper format for a little while there. Both of those cards coming in Modern Horizons. It doesn't ramp you, but it really doesn't need to. It's so cheap. It's so efficient. It replaces itself. It's an engine in and of itself when you're able to blink it with things like Core Skyfisher, Glint Hawk, or the aforementioned Ephemerate. It's so absurd, this card. And you're right. It's so innocuous.
Yeah, it doesn't look like this would be like the format all-star across freaking Vintage all the way to Pauper. But you can't deny its playability and how it just makes snow lands better than regular basic lands. All right, so for my number 6, I love my number 6. This is one of my favorite Magic cards. The literal second this thing was printed, it flew directly into my cube. There's a really fun sort of anecdote from Mike Turian, who said at one point when the set this card came out in, was released, he said, well, no one's paying attention. This card's weird that no one's paying attention to this card. And the person who he was talking to immediately went out and bought like 200 copies of it, because it didn't take long, about a month or 6 weeks from there, before the world blew up about Coalition Relic. Coalition Relic was a gigantic monster, awesome card, still $10 from Future Sight, $6 from Masters 25. Coalition Relic is a 3 generic mana artifact. It showed up as a rare in Future Sight. It taps to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, or you tap to put a charge counter on it, and it says at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, remove all charge counters from Coalition Relic. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool for each counter removed this way.
I have a confession to make. I still don't know what this card does. You're reading it to me. You're reading it to me.
Yes.
But
it ramps you from 3 to 6. That's all it does.
You just get 2 mana.
Right.
You
play
get 2
it.
mana?
You play it, you put a charge counter on it, and say go. When it comes back to your turn, you're going to untap it, you're going to remove that counter, get you a mana. All right?
You're going to play your 4th land, and then you're going to tap it for a mana, and then you're going to have 6 mana.
That's a lot of work.
It's not a lot of work.
But
it's also not a lot of work. In Time Spiral Block Constructed, once again, this card was a terror. When you played 3, 4, 5 colors, Relic Control in Standard was a huge deal. This was my number 7.
Nice.
I purposely left this card out of decks because I'm one of the weirdos that net decks commander decks, and sometimes I'll see a list that'll have a Coalition Relic, and I'm like, what else you got?
Right. Well, I guess if you don't like winning, then you can leave Coalition Relic on the sidelines.
My Spheres of Suns
this card is too complicated for me. Get me some random graveyard animal that has 45 words on it. I'd much rather figure out how Icarid and Nether Spirit work than figure out how charge counters operate on a Coalition Relic. Jeepers creepers, Miss Campbell. You should block people on your accounts again, because this is embarrassing. Unbelievable. We're going into the red zone in the top 10s. You're wrong, and I hate you.
Oh my god.
Coalition Relic is amazing, and you need to rethink your life if you're the commander person on our podcast and don't like a Coalition Relic.
You know?
It's amazing. This card is incredible. Not only does it ramp you, it fixes you.
You read dredge cards and, retirement accounts for a living. How is this card the line in the sand?
A charge counter, we're out. We're done.
I can't be bothered. This thing has 2 tap abilities? Ugh. I'd rather take a nap. I'd rather play a Commander's Sphere.
Oh, wow. All right.
Unbelievable.
Well, that was my number 6.
My number 7.
Your number 7. Very nice.
Never.
She would never, ever.
This is... I can't even do the rest of this podcast anymore.
Oh my god.
This is ridiculous.
I'm on tilt. I'm straight tilted. Aaron, what's your number 5?
My number 5, so we're starting to get
I don't care what her number 5 is.
We're done.
I don't care.
Done. Coalition Relic, y'all. Broke the whole podcast.
Well, let me introduce you to some good cards, Ruben. My number 5 was one of those cards that was meant to be a drawback. Kind of like the Astrolabe. When the Astrolabe came out, it's 1 snow. But they were banking on that snow. Oh, bank snow. That was good. But they were counting on that being a drawback, that making a snow mana would be difficult, and therefore the Astrolabe wouldn't be so good. This was one of those cards that, again, it's going to make you do something that you're supposed to hate. You're supposed to inherently not want to do this. But if you're playing the right deck, this is exactly what you want to be doing. My number 5 is Lion's Eye Diamond. So Lion's Eye Diamond costs 0. It's an artifact from Mirage. And sacrifice it and discard your hand. Why? Why would you want to do that? There have been so many articles written about card advantage. Why would you want to do such a thing? But if you do that, you can add 3 mana of any 1 color, activate this ability only any time you can cast an instant. If you're playing Storm, there's a wonderful thing you can do called Holding Priority. And so if you're playing Infernal Tutor, and you need to be Hellbent, you can become Hellbent with this card. If you're playing Dredge, for example, and you want to cast a spell and you need to get something in your yard first, you can hold priority, discard your hand, and then you can do a thing, and you'll have dredgers in your yard for when you do things. For the right strategies, this card is everything. The Mystic Forge decks that were a thing for a little while in Vintage, kind of the same thing. You would kind of crack this and then be like, what's on top? And then you could keep the chain going. The Storm decks, the PO decks, just the most broken decks in the game want to be using this card, and I couldn't be prouder to be a member.
Yeah. Lion's Eye Diamond's one of those cards that has one of the most hilarious price histories of all time. I think these days it's up over $250 a piece.
About 175 to 2.
Yeah, I'm seeing about $200 or so.
But there was a long time where they were, 60, 70, 80. And
I got them for 80 and I was bitter.
And for years, they were garbage. Uh-huh. For years and years and years, no one knew what to do with this card, and then Eternal formats happened. Because, in Standard, in Mirage, Like, what are you going to do with a Lion's Eye Diamond? There's nothing to really do. But
it felt like the booby prize when you opened this thing back in the day. It really did.
But now you can do things. Well, first of all, it's free, so you get an extra storm for your storm decks, and you can activate it while you have your Ad Nauseam on the stack, or your Time Twister on the stack, or any of those or Infernal Tutor, or Burning Wish, or whatever, what have you. Not to mention the fact that things like Past in Flames exist. I've even used a Lion's Eye Diamond in Painter's Servant Grindstones.
Yes!
To just activate abilities.
I think you can do it in response to a Tinker, right? Like you tinker and then whoop, and then...
Yep, you can do that too. You can activate a Charbelcher with this mana. Yes. Like, there's lots of things that you can do with the mana, even though you have the high cost of having to discard your hand. And oh, by the way, sometimes you want to discard your hand. Hello, Dredge.
Well... Yeah, so this card
I've done dumb things with Street Wraith. Like, one of the things I love to do is, like, so you do... there are, like, especially if you have, like, a crappy hand sometimes, there are hands you can keep that are, like, Diamond, Dredger, Street Wraith. So you'll do, like, cycle, holding priority, and then you crack, and then you can just get there. It's dumb.
Wow. Lion's Eye Diamond was part of what I would describe as sort of the sizzle cycle. There was a series of cards that Rosewater, particularly, I guess it was Inquest, but as I understand it, was Rosewater through Inquest, who talked about, in Mirage, there's going to be a 0-cost artifact that makes 3 mana of any one color. And you're like, oh, snap, what's it going to be, Papa Rosewater? And then everyone gets disappointed. And they're like, there's going to be a 1 mana, 12 Trampler.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
No.
Phyrexian Dreadnought. Mm-hmm. And then turns out both of those cards are extremely breakable, but you needed to wait 5 to 10 years to do it.
Right. And those 5 to 10 years were lonely and sad for all those cards, I assure you, as I got rid of at least 1 to 2 Lion's Eye Diamonds, probably in the trash. Because at the time, they were just straight Garbo, which is unfortunate. Ruben, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is one of our past preview cards, ladies and gentlemen. We had the privilege...
And undecideds.
Ladies, gentlemen, others, and boths. Mm-hmm. We had the privilege of previewing this card for the Dominaria expansion. As my number 5 is Gilded Lotus.
Oh.
Gilded Lotus originally came out in Mirrodin and has been reprinted, half dozen times. And it costs 5 mana, and it says tap, add 3 mana of any one color, because it's a Lotus. It's been in a bunch of decks. I mean, it's been first of all, it's a popular commander card. It's also won a Pro Tour, as I've been trying to make sure that I point out, as part of the famous George W. Bosch deck that Rickard Osterberg won Pro Tour New Orleans with in 2003, which was essentially a sort of mono, like red. It was mostly mono brown, but it had red and blue cards in it. And it was just trying to play big, giant artifacts, and Gilded Lotus is certainly a way to do that. It's just a really excellent card. It sees a ton of play in casual formats, and to this day is, it's been reprinted a bunch, but it's still like $5 a piece.
Well, I mean, I think in sort of if you look at it here, it was printed in Mirrodin, right? Took a long time until Magic 2013. That was like 8 years later. Mm-hmm. 8 or 9 years, really. Then From the Vault 20 showed up, and until From the Vault 20, until Dominaria, there was basically nothing. This card was approaching like $12, $15 as I recall, until they reprinted it in Dominaria. So we now have like a $3-ish, $2.50-ish, affordable version of the card, which is great because this is sweet. Obviously it calls back Lotus. We're in Dominaria. That was super huge for nostalgia, which was great. This was my number 8. So this was my only hire, was Gilded Lotus, because I thought this card was incredible for all the casual formats, for all sort of the right reasons, right? It's the repeatable format version of a very classic spell, named after it, the pictures sort of, modeled after it, and I thought it just sort of fired on all cylinders for what a Mana Rock could be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Let's see here. For my number 5. This is an absolute favorite. This is a absolute powerhouse that showed up in a Ravnica set, and I was like, wow, I can't. Like when it kind of showed up, you were like, oh, okay, that's really good. But then over time, you're like, holy cow, that card's actually ridiculous. To now an over $100 Kaladesh Invention, to being actually printed again. Not only was it in Return Ravnica, it was in Guilds of Ravnica. Chromatic Lantern is my number 5, and I absolutely love this artifact.
My number 7.
Nice. It's 3 generic mana for a rare artifact, again from Return to Ravnica and Guilds of Ravnica. This says lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, and it has tap to add 1 mana of any color itself. So it makes all of your lands tap for whatever you want. It also taps whatever you want. It fixes all the things, and that's a damn good mana rock if I've ever seen one.
So good. I mean, I remember this seeing standard play, which is saying something. Like I said, I run it in any commander deck that runs more than 2 colors. You absolutely want this. The fact that you can use it right away. It doesn't have any sort of weird come into play tap clause. It doesn't have a weird filtering clause where you have to like pay a colorless and get something. It has this sort of Urborg style effect of like making all of your lands make whatever mana you want, which is perfect. And the fixing is just so beautiful. One of the few commander staples that, I like my commander pretty cheap, but like I will absolutely drop $5 or $6 for this because it just pays for itself. No pun intended.
Whenever I see a Chromatic Lantern, I just know that there's nonsense that's about to happen. There's like, somebody's got a bunch of basic lands, and then it's Chromatic Lantern, and then they untap, and it's like, you have 3 planes in play, and here comes a cruel ultimatum. Right? Like, it's just, there's nothing good that comes after a Chromatic Lantern. Like, the types of player, it's your Aliantrazis. It's, my buddy Jack Grannon nearly won Rhode Island States with cards he pulled out of his trade binder and Chromatic Lanterns one year.
Nice.
And yeah, that's one of my fondest memories of this card. It is just complete nonsense, and that's the best kind of mana rock, in my opinion.
There you go. You said it was your number 7, Aaron?
Yes.
Very nice. All right, let's move here to our number 4. Aaron, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is a card that people have asked to be banned in Modern. It has been seen as a problematic card in Modern. It sees play in every format it's legal in that I can think of, going all the way up to Vintage. Still goes for over $100, despite being reprinted once or twice. And some would argue it's even better than what it was inspired by. Another one of those cards that's supposed to have a drawback, but is frighteningly easy to get going. My number 4 is Mox Opal. So Mox Opal is 0. Was originally printed in Scars of Mirrodin. And it has Metalcraft. It's a legendary artifact, meaning you have to have at least 3 or more artifacts in play. And if you do, you can tap it and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. This is amazing. Hardened Scales, Affinity, the Urza decks, going into Legacy, a lot of the, sort of the artifact-heavy decks that are in that format. Vintage, obviously, the PO decks, whatever. This card is amazing. It's not bound by color restrictions. The Moxen, which we will certainly talk about later in the show, only make a certain color of mana, and you need all 5 of them if you want to cover all of those bases. This card does not worry about that. Any color. You can do shenanigans with like bouncing it, float it, and do it again. The fact that it can be bounced with cards like Paradoxical Outcome is ridiculous. It's so easy to turn this thing on, and when you do, it just changes the game. And like I said, has been called to be banned in Modern.
Yeah. Multiple times over its history.
This is the reason why, if you look at Modern Affinity just doesn't care about colors. They'll run a Girapur Ethergrid in the same deck as a Rested Piece and the same deck that has a Thoughtseize because largely this card.
Wow. Mox Opal originally showed up in Scars of Mirrodin, and the debut, the spoiling of Scars of Mirrodin partially happened at Pro Tour Amsterdam. In which they had all of the players and the people who were there. They gave them a rave. I'm not kidding.
Yep.
Because
Amsterdam.
Because Amsterdam, right? Because party, right? So I got to party with like me and Patrick Chapin, like grooving on the dance floor and stuff. It was fun.
Show me how you groove.
No.
And he's too old now.
I know, right? Now
his rotator cuffs can't take a groove anymore.
Can't groove it. But one of the cards they had hanging from the ceiling as like, the lights were flashing or whatever, it was Mox Opal kind of turning around. And it was a card, I got to talk to R&D about. And, sort of off the record type stuff, where they're like, we're really worried about this card. Like, you should be, bruh. Yeah. And as it turns out, while it is very, very powerful, it is incredibly good. I'm not sure it's bannable in my opinion, other than being a very sought after, there's just something magical about a Mox. Every single copy of this at this point is over $100, and it runs part of the format is you got this option to be very fast, and can they stop you before you just blow out of the gates thanks to this card? It's dope. I like it. It appears that, for whatever reason, Ruben and I, we get a total mind meld. And we don't say it. We don't talk about this. This happens. We just hear about it after we submit our lists. Because I'm never surprised when we're both number one. I'm never surprised when we're both number two. But when you're down in the lower levels there, and the lower numbers, and you go, of all the mana rocks in Magic, of which there are hundreds, of all the options in Magic, we chose the exact same card. Ruben, tell us what our number 4 is.
There's only a couple of cards that have won Worlds twice. And one of them won Worlds in 1999 in the Kai Bude Wildfire deck, and then won Worlds in 2000 in a John Finkel Tinker deck. So when you win Pro Tours with Kai Bude and John Finkel, you're in rarefied air. And our number 4, Thran Dynamo, has pulled off that feat. Thran Dynamo is a 4 colorless mana artifact, originally an uncommon in Urza's Destiny, and it has tap, add 3 colorless mana to your mana pool.
That's right. Adds 3 wingdings. Just like that. 4 mana, you get 3 back. You get 3 from there on out, essentially. It takes you from 4 to 8, for God's sake, if you make your land drop the following turn. So, and even if you don't, it took you from 4 to 7 just by itself, which is pretty incredible. And Thran Dynamo is a force to be reckoned with. It makes a ton of mana. Wizards has not gotten anywhere close to putting it in standard anymore, but they did put it right back into Commander 2019, which is pretty dope because this is like a $4.50 card.
Thran Dynamo is pretty great, but so is a Tran Dynamo.
Oh boy!
You're welcome.
All right.
Tran Dynamo Mafia. This card was particularly popular alongside Wildfire and Tinker. Those were both very colorless mana hungry decks. One of the first cards that I really remember being like, oh dear, this card is not possibly fair at all. Yeah. The mana in Urza's block between things like Voltaic Key, Grim Monolith, Thran Dynamo, Worn Power Stone that we talked about earlier. I mean, you just had all the wingdings that you could possibly want.
Yeah, I also like how Wizards was like, Voltaic Key isn't broken, right? It's only broken when we give you the broken artifacts because they reprinted it in Magic 2011 and nothing happened.
Yep.
0. It was a snooze fest. All right, let's move on here to number 3. Aaron, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is the last hire on my list.
Ooh, yeah, 3 hires. All right. Ruben, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is I think it's the only card on my list that hasn't had a Pro Tour win or a Worlds win or a competitive win, and that's mostly because it does nothing in constructed formats. My number 3 is Arcane Signet.
Nice.
Arcane Signet is from Throne of Eldraine.
Sure
Recently came out. It's not available in packs, mind you, but it is in all those Brawl decks. Going for about $9 right now. Hopefully that price will go down once the new printings come out. 2 colorless mana common artifact. Tap, add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity.
Yeah.
Probably going to be one of, if not the most ubiquitous mana rock in all of the commander formats. Brawl, Commander, Tiny Leaders, Canadian Highlander, whatever, what have you. Because it's exactly what you want it to do. It does exactly what you want it to do. It fits all of your mana requirements. It's a Fellor Stone for yourself that doesn't require any lands. It just does everything.
Yeah.
So it ramps you from 2 to 4, and it even fixes your mana.
This is my number 8. We've talked a lot about drawbacks and that, a good mana rock at 2 mana is kind of hard to find. That doesn't come into play tapped, that makes the mana that you specifically need, that you don't have to pay to filter. It just comes out and gets going right away, is exactly what you need. And this was the card that, I think some people bought those decks because they like Brawl, but I think this card was really just there to sell the packs, quite honestly. I knew so many people that couldn't give a rip about Brawl, but they absolutely wanted this card, and it's not hard to see why.
Yeah, my hope is that one day in the future that this $9 price tag is a joke. And y'all are going like, "Law, I can't believe they paid $9." Well, look, they paid 20 before the Brawl decks actually got into stores.
It was worse. It was way worse.
It was crazy because Arcane Signet does exactly what you want all the time. It fixes your mana perfectly. It's not like my, old man Magic's Fellor Stone. I sure hope they're playing my colors. No, man. This is always your colors every single time, no matter what happens, which is great. So that said, we're going to move on here to Aaron. Listen, Aaron has a higher for number 3. My number 3 is also a Monster Tournament staple. This was absolutely huge. This was in the World Championship deck from 1999 and 2000. Much like John Finkel and Kaipood, they were also running this stupidly overpowered thing. Wizards had, I don't know what they were thinking, honest to God, what in the world they were thinking with these giant drawbacks on their big, giant, they're more like mana rocks. They're like mana boulders, they're like, they're mana towers. They could be, in fact, mana monoliths, like Grim Monolith. Oh, thank you. Grim Monolith is a rare from Urza's Legacy. Casual $144 right now.
Yeah.
Lord God, it's part of the reserve list. It is a 2 generic mana rare artifact that says it does not untap during your untap step. Oh no, whatever shall we do? It taps to add 3 colorless mana, and for 4 generic mana, you can untap it. So it doesn't take much to untap it. Again, this was printed in a format with Voltaic Key, which is ridiculous. And
now we have Manifold Key, which you can have more than one key. You can also play this a paradoxical outcome and just bounce it to where the tapping doesn't matter. When Karn, the great creator, was taking over Vintage, this card was everywhere. And when people were trying to figure out how to deal with the Karn decks, they were really worried about this card, because this is the card that let you cheat Karn out pretty faithfully on turn 1, or the Mystic Forge decks. This was the card that enabled those strategies as well. And so I have seen this card do hideous things, and I've been on, the other side of the hideous things as well. But yeah, this card definitely makes you feel things. And again, that drawback, if you have the right cards, is not really a drawback at all. Or if you just plan on winning, if you're just like, it doesn't untap it, you'll be dead.
Yeah.
I believe when I was in Anaheim, California, many years ago for a Grand Prix, I had seen the test foil printing. They were testing foils back in Urza's Legacy, and they made a foil Grim Monolith as one of the test foil prints. That thing was like, I think at the time it was like $4,000, $5,000, something crazy.
I mean, Urza's Legacy was the first set that had foils.
Wait, is there foils with this one?
Yes.
Oh, it was a test
Urza's
foil.
Saga was the ones that had test foils.
Okay, it might have been a different one. I apologize.
Because I recall, young Ruben, the first time I ever bought a booster box was a booster box of Urza's Legacy. And the first pack I opened out of my first booster box of Urza's Legacy had a foil Grim Monolith in it. And I sold it for $60 whole. And I was the happiest. I was like, $60?
That paid for the box.
That paid for the box!
That's right.
It was the best sale ever! And, Grim Monolith, it ramps you from 2 to 6! Like, get out of here! Get out of town! Are you kidding me? That's enough mana to play a Grindstone, play a Painter's Servant, and then activate your Grindstone, all in one whole turn. Or play a Wormcoil Engine, or whatever it is you want to do with your ridiculous mana. Yeah, Grim Monolith is spectacular. It's a great one.
Yeah, the young child Ruben opened a $1,347.23 Magic card.
If only I'd held on to it for... What year is this?
Right.
For 20 years.
Yep, a casual 20. That's all you needed. Would have beat the stock market, I think.
Probably.
I think
Certainly.
It did. It did. Don't worry. Many times over. Either way, let's move on here to number 2. Ruben, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is higher on someone else's list.
Oh goodness. Well, Aaron, what's your number 2?
I'm going to pull a Ruben here and name a category of cards, because you can't just choose one. I mean, if you're going to name, you can't have a list of mana rocks without having the OGs on there. And these are cards that I didn't think it was possible for them to get better through the years, but they're powerful on their own. But when you combine them with cards that have recently been printed, they really push them over the top. My number 2 is the OG Moxen, which is Sapphire, Jet, Pearl, Ruby, and Emerald. So they all do the same thing. They all cost 0. And when they enter the battlefield, you can tap them to make 1 mana of their respective colors. And it's, if you were around for the originals, tapping this artifact can be played as an interrupt. So when you pair these with Prowess, when you pair this with Monastery Mentor, your mentors get out of hand very, very quickly. When you pair this with Paradoxical Outcome, return those artifacts. Great. These are cards. Not only are these mana rocks, these are cards. This is giving you card advantage. The things that this is capable of, if you're playing any sort of Bolas' Citadel deck, which is seeing play in Vintage right now, this is not life. It's 0. It's Storm. Sometimes you play these arbitrarily just to have a Storm count if you're playing a Vintage Storm deck. Just a card like this that started off good and got better with age. I mean, I just can't say enough about it. And the fact that it has inspired other cards. We've seen Mox Diamonds. We've seen Mox Opals. We've seen Mox Ambers. You know, when you hear the word Mox, you think of one thing, and it doesn't usually involve playing fair.
there isn't really a word in Magic where you maybe Lotus, maybe. But even Lotus has been diffused a little bit. You hear the word Mox, and you know some crap is coming. Like, what is happening?
Look at the decks Mox Amber is in now. The Kethis deck?
It's
I ain't playing fair.
Yeah, exactly. We looked at Mox Amber and we're like, oh, finally, a Mox that isn't going to break. And then Kethis was just everywhere for a month. And it was like, oh, it accidentally the whole format for a month.
And Kethis was like, hold my beer, and just
exactly.
Crack.
The original Moxen are, 5 of the 9 most powerful cards in the history of Magic. And not for nothing, Mox Ruby approves.
Not for nothing, Mox Ruby is the most expensive as of right now.
Is it really?
I thought Sapphire was like the clear winner, not close. It's Mox Ruby.
My red beating heart is so full.
Mm-hmm. Red,
so
it's
happy.
Ruby, then Jet, then Pearl, then Sapphire, then Emerald.
Wow.
That's incredible, isn't it? All right. For my number 2, again, this is an OG artifact. And these days is, I would argue these days is like super revered in ways that, wasn't really revered back in the day. Like, this is like a $30 card that originally showed up. This is all the way from Alpha. And of course, the Alpha versions are a bajillion dollars.
Sure.
A casual $1,200 or whatever. But this is also a card that surprised me because, when I left Magic, when I came back to Magic, and even when I came back to Magic in around Darksteel, and I was in Magic for a long time thereafter, there was never this feeling of, this card's like amazing. This card's like one of the biggest casual cards in existence. This card, when they announced it as a Kaladesh invention, I was like, really? And then I went to look it up and I was like, holy God, what is Mana Vault worth these days?
Yeah.
Mana Vault is nuts. Holy cow. Mana Vault is a 1 generic mana artifact. All right. It's a rare, again, originally from the OG Alpha. It doesn't untap during your untap step. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 4 generic mana. If you do, untap it. At the beginning of your draw step, if it's tapped, it deals 1 damage to you, and you tap to add 3 colorless mana. So for 1 mana, you make 3 colorless mana. So for 1 mana, you go from land number 1 into 5 mana on turn 2. And it's just kind of crazy that back in the day, this didn't see a lot of play in my local metagame. Maybe it was the hot stuff for the Necro winter or whatever. But in East Tennessee, when the boys were playing Magic cards, Mana Vault wasn't seen as this gigantic monster that it ended up being.
Yeah, another one of those cards that enabled those turn 1 cards where you play like land Moxen, and then you go Moxen this, and then 3, whoop, there's a Karn. And you're just like, oh my God. Like, this is another one of those cards that enables cards to be played that were never meant to be played that early. And, artifacts are just busted, man. Like
they brought it in the 5th edition, and even back in the 5th edition, I recall didn't see a lot of play in Standard. It was fine. I think eventually it kind of did right before it sort of rotated out. People were like, wait a minute, this card is ridiculous. But then Wizards was like, no more.
Ramp you from 1 to 5.
And they haven't reprinted it. Have they reprinted it since the Kaladesh invention? Oh, the Ultimate Masters,
so.
right? Ultimate Masters got it.
Okay.
Ultimate Masters and the Ultimate Master Box Topper. I knew there was another version, which was really weird.
Sure.
But regardless, Mana Vault is fantastic. That means we're going to turn the corner here to number 1, numero uno. Ruben, what's your number 1?
So, Aaron pulled a Ruben earlier. Ruben's going to pull a Ruben at number 1.
Oh.
And we haven't named any of them. And so when I think mana rocks,
Leviathan?
no, I don't think Leviathan. Get out of here with that. Unbelievable. Some people's children, I'll tell you what.
That would be an Inkwell Leviathan because it's an artifact, and you can tap it for Urza. So
when I think mana rocks, I think 2 colorless mana artifact that taps to ramp you for an additional mana. Mm-hmm. Some of them can also fix mana. This cycle of artifacts is the mana rocks. They are the mana rocks. They're the signets. It's what I have as my number 1. I think that they are probably the most ubiquitous mana rocks in all of Commander. I bet if you added up all of the signets together, they outnumber all of the other 2 mana rocks combined. Well, that would be my guess. The mana rocks first appeared in the original Ravnica expansions. Ravnica, Guildpact Ascension. Several of them have top-aided or won Pro Tours. I think all 3 teams, or all 3 decks of the winning team at Pro Tour Charleston had some number of signets in their deck. Arcane Signet is the namesake for this cycle of artifacts. Azorius, Boros, Dimir, Golgari, Gruul, Izzet, Orzhov, Rakdos, Celestia, and Simic Signet. I'll give you Izzet Signet because I think that one's probably the most popular in Commander. 2 colorless mana to cast. It's just an artifact. It says pay a colorless and tap, add blue-red to your mana pool. That's all it does, but it is so ubiquitous. They're all over the place. Everyone knows what they do. They've been reprinted a bunch of times and are still all over the place and beloved.
You bring up a really good point, Ruben, in terms of what is a mana rock. Like, even going into this show, I thought I knew what a mana rock was. You're tapping something, you're getting mana. It's a simple transaction. But, as I researched this, there's filtering, which is kind of what you're describing. And we've talked about with cards like, the Prismatic Lens and things like that. You also have artifacts that are spell reduction cards, where they're not necessarily giving you mana, but you have those medallions, where it's like Pearl Medallion, Jet Medallion. Those are considered mana rocks because you are saving mana by having these cards in play. You have the filters, you have that. I mean, there's just so many things that, you have mana rocks that help you get lands that could be considered mana rocks as well. You're getting mana from that transaction.
Some that have to sacrifice, some that don't.
And so you have the altars, Phyrexian Altar, Ashnod's Altar. You're getting mana. I mean, and so I did not expect going into this to reconsider so many cards that I play with every day and think, that's a mana rock. And my world changed after doing the show.
Nice. It appears that based on sorting by EDH Rec rank, that Dimir Signet is the only one ahead of Izzet Signet.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Is that so? Is it so?
I mean, that's just the way it's sorted. I'm just like,
Is it so?
Is it? Well, look, signets were fantastic. There was much chagrin made about the idea that they removed signets from the cube at one point. Tom Lapilli, I believe it was, who removed the signets, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, how could you possibly remove signets from the cube? That's just one of the staples." And he's like, they kind of fix too well. They kind of make colors not matter as much. They get you ramping, which is very powerful. They get you color fixing, which is very powerful. They ramp
and fix. They really just eliminate the need for rampant growth.
Yeah, and that's sort of so removing signets from the cube, and eventually I removed signets from mine as well, because there was a diversification that started to happen, and people started to go into monocolor more, and they stopped sort of defaulting to your 2-color, 3-color, sometimes 4-color good stuff decks of I took some City of Brasses or whatever, some Gemstone Mines, and took a whole bunch of signets and a whole bunch of Karus, and between the Karus and the signets, it was just ridiculous and somewhat overpowering. But signets are still absolutely fantastic. Aaron, what's number 1?
So my number 1 was tough. I knew my top 5 was pretty much set. I just had to arrange them in a certain order. And I was really torn between my number 1 and my number 2. Like, I knew the Moxen had to be there. I thought about making them number 1, but then I realized there could only really be a number 1. And it has to be the one. This is the card that anytime somebody who doesn't play Magic in my life sees a news story about this, they post something on my Facebook wall, or my dad will call me and be like, that little card game you play was on PBS tonight because of this card. Every single time I can count on this card making news and people in my life telling me about it, and rightfully so. My number one is Black Lotus. So Black Lotus costs 0. You can tap it to add 3 mana of any single color of your choice to your mana pool, and you sacrifice it. Tapping this artifact can be played as an artifact. The unlimited costs $12,000. I had the immense fortune to be able to play with a real Lotus at Eternal Weekend last year. Ironically enough, I had asked for several cards to borrow that weekend, and this was the card I got first.
Wow.
I had a harder time getting Force of Wills for the event than I did getting a Lotus, and I'll never forget, my friend Tim sent it to me in this really clever package. He sent me a steno pad, very similar to this one, and he had it like in the middle, and it was like taped, and it was very clandestine, and the minute I held it, I felt so dirty. Because I'm holding $12,000 in my hand, and I'm like, I'm not worthy. And it just feels amazing. You know, we've talked about cards that were never meant to see the light of play. Narset? How do you like a turn 1 Narset? It's not fun. And you can do that because of this card. You can slam a Lotus, play turn 1 Narset. Turn 1 Oath. Oath of Druids on turn 1. I mean, this card just enables nothing fair.
I've played so many turn 1 Bloodbraid Elves in Cube because of this card.
Turn 1 Necropotence for the Storm decks. Just get going. I mean, just the beauty, the raw power of this card. Just the legend of this card. When you hear Lotus, Lotus Petal, Lotus Bloom, there's just nothing else like it. And rightfully so. It's just beautiful.
Goodness gracious.
It attacks as a 3/3 elf to win Vintage Champs this most recent time as well.
There you go.
Can also be an elk.
There is a sense of when you do, even on Magic Online, like even when I'm just playing with a Lotus in any capacity, I always just feel so unworthy to be doing so, because it has this pedigree where it's like, God, you know?
It's just a little, it's almost shocking. Like, I remember I got to borrow like all the power when I went to the Invitational, and when you draw, you're just like, I just got like magic history in my hand. Let me just do this thing right here because I'm gonna do some broken stuff.
Yeah.
Lord knows they had no idea what was going on back when they originally created Magic, and this was some crazy thing that you might see once ever, when you're playing Magic as you walk the earth or whatever Rich or Garfield imagined you were doing with your Magic cards. But of course, immediately took advantage of that, and good luck finding any copies for less than 5 figures these days.
Yeah.
Jeez, craziness. All right, brings us here to my number 1, which I believe, due to elimination, Aaron's number 3, Ruben's number 2.
Y'all put a ring on it?
Oh yeah, you know I do.
I'm ready.
Yep.
I'm ready.
Was talking to some people today about getting the Kaladesh Invention version of this card because it's a bajillion dollars, and how they were lamenting, man, when the Kaladesh Invention version of this card first came out, you could get it for like maybe $100, maybe $80 to $100, depending on the deal you found at the time. And he skipped it for something else, and he was like, man, I wish I just gotten my Soul Ring when I had the opportunity. The coolest, the sexiest version, the version I would request one Mr. Rich to put on the screen, is the Kaladesh Invention version of Soul Ring. Of course, showing up in the OGs, printed a bajillion times, still worth plenty of dollars, and the new promo version also worth lots of dollars that you can only get at the Command Fests. Soul Ring is 1 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless mana, and that's what it does.
Yep. My number 3. If you want to know who's the threat at the table in Commander, go after the person who played a turn 1 Soul Ring, because every single time it's just like, yep, that's the enemy.
The interesting thing about that, though, is that the Command Zone guys did a pretty extensive study that said that if you play a turn 1 Soul Ring, your odds of winning actually go down in 4-player games because everyone gangs up on you.
Yeah.
By about 5%, which I thought was pretty fantastic because this card has such an overwhelming effect on the game, being able to ramp from 1 to 4. You can play a turn 2 Factor Fiction, a turn 2 Jace the Mind Sculptor, a turn 2 Elspeth Knight Errant, a turn 2 Explosive Vegetation, whatever and what have you. Soul Ring is by far and away the most popular mana rock in Commander. It is banned in Legacy, it is restricted in Vintage, it is always played in most Vintage decks, because it's able to jump you so quickly and so efficiently with no drawback whatsoever. Soul Ring is just the beginning and the end when it comes to manning rocks.
Yeah, and just plays well with the other rocks as well. You talked about the signets. This goes beautifully with the signets, where it's like you just have that 2 mana laying around. You pour it into it, you can get exactly the color mana that you need, and the art being so iconic. At the Eternal Weekend, not this past year, but the one before that, that was the art on the back of the hoodie, which I still have. It was that beautiful black and white Soul Ring, and I still get people who, if I wear that out in public, sometimes people still recognize that. I get let's say one of two things. One, they're like, is that the ring from the ring?
Right.
And I'm like, no.
Sure.
But every once in a while, you'll get one person that's like, I know that. And you're like, you give them a minute and they're like, that's from that card game. And it's like, It's just one of those ubiquitous items, kind of like a Lotus.
Goodness. Soul Ring was incredible from the moment I saw it back in the day. And I was like, wait, that's a one for the two, and which immediately was followed by, yeah, that's busted. And I'll be like, yeah, that seems totally busted. But didn't make it any less sort of lauded and exciting. Incredible Judge Gift card in 2005, which looks amazing. Plenty of versions thereafter, and whether you like it or not, whether you like Mishra's Workshop and Vintage, whether you like Brainstorm and Legacy, you got Soul Ring and Commander. It's just how the format works. And yeah, if you want to put a nice big target on yourself, you could do that, or you could play that Soul Ring just like I do and get targeted anyway. But that,
because odds are, if you're playing a Soul Ring, you can take what people throw at you, where it's like, come on, Mama's got it.
Because you're about to throw something down on turn 2.
Exactly.
So Ring, let's go. Come on, let's do this.
Don't dish it if you can't take it.
That's right. And that was our top 10 mana rocks. You'll see them on the screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we'll want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me. And don't be fooled by the rocks that I got.
Wow.
Still Aaron from the block.
Thank you, Ruben.
Hey, buddy. You rock.
Wow. Move here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-hosts, Aaron Camel and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching or listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at MagicMikes, on Twitter at MagicMikesCast, our Magic Mike subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at MagicMikesPodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at MagicMikesPodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes and Spotify. Or join us here next week. Same time, same place for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.